So, the introduction. So, I did volume for years. I would constantly skip reps, sets, exercises, entire workouts, entire weeks of workouts sometimes, just generally skipping a lot of the volume intended. And oftentimes, I get nagging injuries from excessive workouts, frequency, and volume, shortchanging my gains in the long run, and just kind of dreading my workouts throughout the day. I would be thinking about my workout, how much I fucking hated the idea of doing it, and then eventually I just skip it anyway. Or if I did do it, I get very minimal enjoyment out of it. So today I'll be convincing you of the more logical man system that is high intensity by saving time, getting better gains, and I haven't skipped a set, a rep, or a workout since switching to high intensity about a year ago. And I've made gains during a cut, a very aggressive cut in the last year, more than I had in bulks previously, or very half-assed bulks. So let's get into it. So the first point is that it saves time. High intensity done right will average out about 30 minutes a session. These time frames will change depending on the programming. If you do, say, once a week, full body, it might be more like an hour and 20 minutes. If you're doing an upper lower split, it might be more like 30 minutes a session. If you're doing a push pull split, it might be 20. And then, if you train like me 4 to 5 days a week, kind of more of a bodybuilding split, you're looking at 15, 20 minutes maximum, 30 if you're doing a leg day, maybe. But generally, you're looking at about an hour or two a week. I train probably about an hour and a half a week versus the 10 plus hours of working out that you would do for a volume program. And even if you only trained, say, an hour a day on volume, that's 7 hours versus the potential one you could have done on high intensity, which is great for people that have fuck all time. Some people have a wife and kids. Some people have lives. Some people have really extensive jobs. Maybe you work 5 days a week. At the end of your work, you're fucking tired. Maybe you're a tradie or a construction worker and you're tired at the end of your 10-hour shift fucking moving concrete all day, and you only have weekends where you actually have energy. Well, this would be perfect for you. On the weekend, you have your day off, you go into the gym for an hour, do your full body, high intensity session, and then you're fucking done. You get the same gains as you would have doing volume 7 days a week, 10 hours a week. You get the same results for a fraction of the fucking time. And if you're lazy, it's also perfect. I'm lazy. I don't like working out that much. I like working out now that I've found high intensity, but not that much. So now, while I do such shorter workouts, it's easier to adhere to. I haven't skipped any workouts. So it's perfect for lazy people. It's perfect for people with no time, which leads me on to my next point. It's easy. It's the lazy man's workout. So don't be fooled by high intensity advocates that will say, oh, the majority of people don't do high intensity because it's difficult. Most people don't do high intensity because they don't know any better. Most people think that more is better due to other life principles, but it's not the truth. And then if people think it's that much harder, it's not. There are some parts of high intensity that are harder than volume, but for the vast majority, volume is actually harder. There's only one aspect to high intensity that's harder, and that's that reps hurt more on high intensity because you're actually going to failure. You're actually making an adaptation. So the last 2 to 3 reps really hurt. But once you can compartmentalize the fact that it's just 2 to 3 reps per set that really hurt, it's quite easy to wrap your head around. It's much easier to do. If you're just doing 2 reps, let's say you're doing 5 sets of exercise per workout, and let's say 2 of the reps really, really hurt. Well, those 2 reps, maybe 5 seconds of time under tension. There's 5 seconds of pain. 5 times 5 is 25. You have 25 seconds of pain throughout your workout. It's really not that fucking hard to do 25 seconds of a bit of agony. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, you're doing 60 full seconds of pain through a workout because you're doing forced reps, drop sets, and rest pauses. Then sure, you have 60 seconds of pain. That's still not that fucking hard. If you can't deal with 60 seconds of pain and you can somehow deal with 9 minutes of a massive amount of boredom, then go for it. Keep doing volume. But for most people, or at least for myself and all the clients and people that I've talked to that do high intensity, it is much easier to just rip the Band-Aid off rather than slowly ripping off that Band-Aid and then feeling the hairs and the scabs come off over time. Just pull it off and it's done. With volume, I would constantly skip programming because of this, for this exact reason. It would take too long to pull the Band-Aid off. So With high intensity, it's a band-aid ripped off and you're done. And it's fucking easy because it saves time. It's 15, 20 minutes in, out, done. Bang. It's the easy, lazy man's workout. The next point is you are focused. You're actually zoned in. In high intensity, all your effort is just going into one set. 5 of these sets, just 5 sets essentially a workout. Very easy to put your energy into 5 sets. It is quite difficult to put a bunch of energy and intensity in numerous sets throughout a workout. Spreading that intensity upon numerous sets, numerous rest intervals is difficult. And over those workouts, these long drawn out workouts, your energy and focus is dropping off. So let's say you start on, let's say you're doing a back and bicep day. You start with your pull up, you're at 100% fresh. By the end of the pull up sets, let's say you do 4 sets of 12. By the end, you're at maybe 90%. Still feeling pretty good, still feeling pretty energized and focused. Now you're onto your row. You're at 90%. By the end of your rowing sets, you're at like 70%. You're kind of dropping off a little bit. Now you do your pullover, and now you're at like 60%. And then oftentimes with volume workouts, there's too many exercise selections anyway. So let's say you do another fucking back movement, whatever it is. Now you're at 50%. Now you go onto your biceps or your rear delts, these smaller muscles, and you're like really half-assing it. You're like 40, 30% focus. You're mentally drained. You're all sweaty. You're just fucking bored and tired and done. You're going to half-ass these smaller body parts at the end of your sessions. This is how you get lagging body parts. So you have your biceps, your rear delts, your traps, your forearms, your calves, your abs, your lower back, these different muscles that oftentimes get neglected because by the time we get to them, we're fucking tired and we can't put all our effort into these body parts. Whereas with high intensity, you are fresh. You're fresh throughout. It's 5, 6, maximum like 7 or 8 sets. And if you're doing 5 to 6 sets, it's like doing one exercise in volume. So by the time you get to your biceps, you've only done 4 or 5 sets, you're still fresh. You can then put all your mental energy into those biceps. You can put all your mental energy into those rear delts, those calves, whatever muscle it is, they will no longer be lagging because you're putting all your energy into it. A good example of this is Mike Mensa and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, there's a history between these two, and I'm going to get into it because it would be a biased opinion anyway. I like Mike Mensa. But objectively, Mike had a more well-rounded physique. Arnold had an exceptional physique by all means. The best chest of all time, amazing biceps, no worries. But he did have some lagging body parts. His legs, his calves, his rear delts, and a few other different muscle parts like forearms were kind of a little bit lackluster. This is by no means is this a dig at Arnold. He had an exceptional physique. I would fucking kill to have his physique. And in my opinion, he had a better looking physique than Mike Mensa's. However, Mike had no weaknesses, or very minimal weaknesses, and this is because Mike trained with high intensity. So by the time he got to his secondary body parts, genetics aside, he was hitting them massive intensity, so he had no lagging body parts. Arnold had a few because he would train with volume, and by the time you get to the body parts such as calves or, say, back thickness or legs, he would be kind of done. Now, part of this might be genetics, but you can see my point here is with high intensity, you're hitting everything equally, and you're zoned in from start to finish. My next point is that it is fun. I don't know about you, but sitting around for 2 to 5 minutes between your 5x5 set of squats is fucking boring and will zap your will to get intense for each set. You just can't be focused and zoned in like I mentioned previously. Whereas in high intensity, you can get amped up and psyched because it's just one set, and it's fun attacking the weights. It's fun getting amped up, drinking coffee, listening to your favorite tunes, and just attacking the weights like an animal. If you ever seen old Eric Bugenhagen videos before he got on the gear, the dude was having a fuck ton of fun, and his mindset was great. He was just attacking the weights, and he had one of the better physiques among natural community on YouTube at the time. Nowadays, he's on gear. That's neither here nor there. He had an exceptional physique back then, and that's because he was intense and he had a great mindset. And it's easier to have that kind of mentality to weights when you're doing high intensity versus the 90 minutes of resting and dicking around and doing fluff and reps in reserve. And weights is a substitute for violence and aggression. We've lost kind of our ability to expel this adrenaline and neurotic energy that we now hold in ourselves in this day and age in the 21st century, because we can't go out and try and hunt a animal, or we can't go out and try and conquer another land. we have to then use weights or maybe like boxing or Muay Thai, but in this case, weights as a substitute. And one of the greatest ways to do that is attack the weights with high intensity, like your fucking life depends on it. And afterwards, you've had fun, you feel chilled out, all your neurotic energy gone, and you feel accomplished. Unlike volume, where a lot of times you'll be felt kind of wanting at the end. You'll feel like you haven't quite achieved as much. You feel like you need to do more and get back in the gym and keep training because you kind of left something in the tank. High intensity, you won't have that feeling. The next point is progression isn't left up to chance, and programming is simple. So one of the biggest issues with volume is convolution. There's a lot of different factors that go into volume programming, such as peaking, deloading, accessory work, RPE, percentage work, auto-regulated volume, and many, many more different factors that go into it. And then you have the different overarching periodization, concurrent, undulation, these different kind of convoluted things that you have to do in your programming that makes it harder to adhere to. I don't know about you, but for me, simple is much easier to adhere to than complicated. And it typically works better because you're focused and zoned in on what you're doing versus all these different little things that you have to now compartmentalize, which makes it boring and hard to adhere to. There is a misconception that linear progression is for noobs, it's for beginners, and it's for novices. And there is some truth to this. It is good for novices and beginners to do linear progression because you can progress linearly really fast when you first start hitting weights. You squat 30 kilos one day, the next you're squatting 40. Whereas as you progress and get more advanced, this slows down a lot and you can't add weights every day. You have to start going up by reps a lot of the time. And a lot of the time people want to cheat this by doing periodization. So mass amount of volume, mass amount of frequency and work to get a hypercompensation, which then gets you this kind of jumping progression. Up, 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 deload, up, up, up. Whereas linear progression is a steady state that just has you going up consistently and ends up having you in the same kind of end goal, but more consistently, safer and easier. It is easier to adhere to because there's not all this convolution to it, and it's safer because you're not overcompensating with a bunch of work just to potentially get injured or even regress because you've overcompensated and now your body is now adapted, but now it just goes back down again because it no longer needs to have that hypercompensation. It was a temporary state of affairs. So linear progression isn't just for novices. It is perfect for everyone. Dorian Yates is a great example. The dude was fucking incline pressing 5 plates and on a bunch of gear and at his genetic potential, and yet he was still linear progression. He was never doing periodization, and there's many examples of people who just get really strong and really big on linear progression. It is simple, it's easy, and it's adherable. So my next point is gains. Skeptical or not, everyone that does high intensity will see gains. There are many studies and anecdotes proving this fact, including tens of thousands of clients of Mike Mensa, Dorian Yates, Jay Vincent, Arthur Jones, just to name a few, have all had phenomenal gains from training high intensity. The first key factor as to why high intensity works so well is your recovery. In volume work, you're often under-recovered, you're often overtrained. The central nervous system, tendons, and mental state specifically really take quite a hard hit, but also the muscles too can be overtrained, although typically to a lesser degree. The muscles oftentimes recover within 48 to 72 hours typically, sometimes 24 depending on how hard you hit it. But a lot of these studies have been done on people who are not trained and they aren't getting remotely to failure. But let's just say for the sake of argument, muscles do recover within 48 to 72 hours. Cool. Well, the central nervous system, tendons, and ligaments don't. So whether or not the muscles are recovered, you still need more time for the central nervous system to recover. Typically 5 to 7 days, especially if you're training it with high intensity. If you don't, the next time you work out, you're not fully recovered, and thus you will plateau. You will not make gains, strength and muscle-wise. And you will also suffer injuries, which will then hold your training on prolonged, which will then suffer less gains even more because you might be out for months at a time not being able to train. The second key factor is you're finally hitting the required threshold to adapt. You are finally hitting this stimulus threshold that will then give you adaptation to grow. A lot of the time with volume, you're leaving a bunch of reps in reserve or a few reps in reserve, never quite hitting this threshold to grow. And you're trying to overcompensate with volume, but you're never really hitting it because you're never hitting failure. And if you are hitting failure for numerous sets, you're just pissing into the wind, because if you hit that failure, cool, you've hit the threshold to grow. All right, cool. Oh no, you're doing another set. All right, cool. Oh, you're doing another set. Oh, you're doing another set. You've done 4 sets of failure all the way up here. All right, well, we need a bunch of time to recover from this. So 5 days later, oh, you haven't fully recovered. Well, you're training again because it's high frequency. Oh, you're in this kind of limbo where you're never quite even fully recovering. So this threshold that you hit was great, but you never recovered. So we're just looking to hit that high intensity threshold to adapt, and then we're out. 1 set to failure, maybe 2, 3 exercises per body part, and you're done. So, still skeptical? That's understandable. Thanks to our conditioning through our life, we learned that oftentimes more is better. More wealth is better, more health is better, more happiness is better. But like many other things, this doesn't apply to exercise science. Too much food will make you fat. Too much sunlight will burn you up. And too much exercise will have you regressing and injured and not making any gains at all. So how much exercise is required? Turns out to be 1 set to failure is adequate, based off numerous anecdotes and studies will prove this fact.
And the childlike simplistic notion that more is better. As children, many gain the notion that more jelly beans are better than less, then carry that unchecked, unchallenged premise through life and misapply it to many subjects, such as bodybuilding science.
So if you're still skeptical, I would invite you to embark upon a 1 body part for 3 months high intensity programming. So if your shoulders or your back or your legs or whatever it might be are lagging, you would do 3 months of 1 body part with 1 set to failure per body part. So it could be a lagging body part, it could be a strong body part, it could be an entirely obligatory body part. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that you experiment with high intensity for 3 months and you have very minimal to lose because it's just 1 body part. And at the very worst, you'll lose some progress over the next 3 months of training with high intensity. However, I guarantee you that if you do high intensity for 3 months on a body part, you will see gains. You will not see muscle loss or strength loss. I'm likely to see more gains in the next 3 months of high intensity training than you've seen in the last year or 2. For years, I had no gains at all due to volume. As soon as I switched to high intensity and I started cutting weight, I started seeing gains in a calorie deficit. So you have nothing to lose. You're just getting, it's really, especially this will work great for people who have lagging body parts and they want to try something new to bring those body parts up, like calves or shoulders, whatever it might be. This would be great. So here's an example of how you would embark upon my high intensity invitation. An example of this would be shoulders. My shoulders were lagging for years. As soon as I went on to high intensity training, they started finally developing, even in a cut. So I'll use the example of shoulders here, but this could be applied to any different body part. 1 body part, just 1. So the first movement would be an anterior press of sorts, seated overhead press, barbell overhead press, etc. And you would be doing it with 1 all-out set to failure like your life depends on it. Or maybe a drop set if you really feel like you need a little bit more stimulus. Most of that's just going to be mental. I do drop sets, but it's mostly mental. Most likely, just the set to failure will be sufficient enough. You then follow this up with a side lateral variation, the exact same principle, maybe an added drop set or a rest pause, and you would be lifting it until you can barely get it up to parallel to the floor again. And then you'd finish it off with a rear delt variation, repeating the exact same principle, just as the same as the overhead press or the seated side lateral. You're done. You don't do any more volume. That's the end of the workout. Nothing added. A day like that would take maybe 15 minutes max. And then you can finish it off with the rest of your shoulder and bicep day or shoulder and tricep day with volume. You could do the triceps or bicep with volume. But the given body part that you choose will only be hit with high intensity. 1 set to failure, that's it. Then you're done. Just a side note, if you're still doing volume, the way that you would then train shoulders is you'd have to do less frequency. So the rest of your training might be higher frequency, but your shoulders will continue being every 5 to 7 days with this training system. Anything shorter than that, you will be under recovered. So apart from not doing any added volume, you're also training less frequently. So don't do this session every 2 to 3 days like the rest of your volume workouts. Do this once a week. Every 7 days is optimal. I'll also add that most people don't know how to train to true failure. Most people think they are training to failure, but they aren't. A lot of the times people have a rep or two in reserve. They mentally can't cope with the pain, or they convince themselves they can't do any more, but you often can typically grind out an extra rep or two. Part of it is a mindset, and sometimes it takes a little while to be able to adapt to the point where you can hit true failure. The first few high intensity sessions I did, I definitely wasn't hitting absolute failure. Nowadays, hitting absolute failure is second nature. It also is a matter of you're not getting to, say you're doing overhead press, you're not pressing feeling like that's the last rep you could have done and then quitting it there. Going, oh, okay, cool, I've completed it, but there's no way I'm going to get another one. No. Failure is when you complete a rep, think you can't get another one, and then try and get another one anyway. And a lot of the times, people will try to get that other one and find that they had that rep in the tank. And then sometimes they'll find that they have another rep in the tank after that. If you don't have another rep in the tank, that's fine, but you need to know that you hit actual failure by failing. So that's a key component to high intensity, is actually hitting failure, not being shy of a rep or two. It's hitting failure. So to summarize, I'd like to finish this video by saying, unlike most high intensity advocates, I don't claim that volume is inferior for results, only high intensity is more logical and consistent, thus oftentimes will result in better results, as volume is oftentimes done wrong and is largely unnecessary. Don't get me wrong, volume is required, but it oftentimes is misinterpreted, and in my next video I'll be breaking down what training volume truly is and what its place in training actually is. If you found this video informative or enlightening, drop a like and subscribe. And any of you guys who are embarking upon my last point, experimenting with high intensity with just one body part, or maybe you're just totally convinced and now you're switching over to high intensity, comment below, let me know what your results are, and also stick around for more high intensity related videos to learn more of the ins and outs, tricks, and kind of mental tricks around high intensity training. Until next time, see you cunts.